Austin. Pronouns are he, him, from Texas. Sounds like you want to talk about woke culture in the atheist community. Can you tell us kind of exactly what you mean by that?
Yes. Hi. First of all, it's really exciting to talk to you guys. And I haven't spoken to you on the show. I mean, I've only called once before. But congratulations on graduating, Dr. Ben. I know that's exciting for you. You've worked really hard on it.
Yeah, it's been a couple years now, but I appreciate it.
You'll always be FSDB to me, sir.
Former student. Yeah, there you go.
And Christy, it's wonderful to talk to you as well.
Yeah, glad to have you. What's on your mind today?
Yes. So I am an atheist, and I'm in several, different atheist forums and all that stuff. And I don't want to sound like a douchebag when I say this, so I want to tread carefully with this particular conversation. But as an atheist, I think so. I want to lay some parameters of what I understand, because the question is regarding gender and sex in the atheist community and how it's kind of changed definitions over the last maybe 5-ish years. So how I've understood sex and gender is gender is a social construct, right? It's how we identify ourselves. And then sex is how we're born. Or well, I mean, more specifically, you can have, XY, you can have, there's a whole thing with chromosomes, and Dr. Ben, I'm sure, would know about that, and you can have both.
Yeah, it's super complicated. It's super complicated.
Yeah, it's very complicated. But as far as identifying ourselves in public, it would be incorrect, and this, again, I'm just repeating, this is my understanding of it. It would be incorrect to say that you are a different sex than what you were born as, and then it would be totally fine to say, oh, well, I was, born a man, but I like to identify as a woman. That would be gender.
So Austin, I want to push back on that because I think you have a misunderstanding of what sex is. As we just mentioned, sex is complicated, right? What factor assigns you to your sex?
Mostly genitalia.
Mostly that. Okay. So let me pose a scenario to you, which is a real scenario. If you have somebody who has female genitalia at birth and then in puberty develops male genitalia, what sex are they?
Well, see, and then that would be a caveat. If I was to give an answer, which I don't think would be appropriate, it would be up to the person.
Okay. So here's the question. Yeah, so here's the thing. So here's the thing, Austin. There's so many scenarios where you can't neatly assign somebody, and the fact that we view sex as a static feature or a static category is incredibly oversimplifying the issue, right? So that was an example of where sex is dynamic. Sex does change, like depending on how you're defining sex, which I would hesitate to say that any one characteristic would assign you to a sex, because it's a conglomeration or a combination of multiple characteristics that would put you more in one box or another. So to say that it's purely genitalia, like, what if you have different genitalia or you have ambiguous genitalia? Then you have to go to the next thing, which would be chromosomes, or some people go to gametes, but either way, you have people that are exceptions, right? And so the question to you then, so if you have all these different scenarios that can play out, number one, your sex can change over time by those criteria. And two, how are you going to enforce if someone is saying the right sex when they're talking about what bathroom they're going to use, et cetera? How do you enforce that?
Well, okay, so great points. I wouldn't enforce it per se. I don't think that that's anything for anybody to enforce. I think it's kind of weird if someone's like, well, I am this, and then someone was like, no, you're not. I think that's weird. Like, now you're just trying too hard. But at the same time, when I'm obviously in science and all of the sciences, there's exceptions. And what you're talking about, I know it happens, but that's not common and it's not normal. Let me take that word away. I don't like that
Austin,
word.
Should we exclude people that have something that's not common?
No, of course.
What's the percentage of intersex people in the population?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
What's the percentage of people with intersex conditions or people who are trans in the population?
See, no, that. Okay, so that second part there is different, and that's kind of one.
Yeah, they're different percentages. They're different percentages, but to say that somebody's a minority, so let's ignore them, is dishonest, right?
Right. Sure. Of course.
Yeah. So then why would we use whether someone's a small percentage to say that they don't count for some reason? They're still people, right?
Sure. Of course.
Yeah. So if I love when people like you are saying, that we're going to adhere to a scientific way of thinking about it, and then proceed to use science to limit to an overly simplified model. That's not more scientific. Sure. That's overly simplifying to dumb it down, which is what you're doing. You're dumbing it down, but it's not more honest.
Well, it's not dumbing it. It's not dumbing it down as much as it is making speech more cohesive. So it's not.
I would disagree with that. I would disagree with that.
Dumbing it down because we're not.
We're not oversimplifying. I mean, that may be a little bit semantic. I don't want to get kind of too far afield, poking at every angle of the trans question. I guess, Austin, I'd like a little bit of clarity from you about maybe what question you had or what proposition you had. What is it that you are looking to understand or maybe encourage us to understand through your phone call here?
Yes, sure. So the thing I'm trying to understand here is that, through the atheist forums that I follow and that I'm a part of, and I feel like, and it's going to seem like I'm running away from it, but I promise I'm coming back. So, okay. And it's going to be quick, I promise. So our mission as atheists is to, and this is something that you guys commonly say on the show, and whenever a very hard in their ways theist calls, and you're speaking to them, many of you guys, speakers, will say, we're not actually talking to them because we know they're not going to change their mind. We're talking to others that might be listening, that might be questioning. But my concern with that is that we should also be talking to those theists as well, with the intent to try to maybe not change their mind, because going into anything trying to change someone's mind is never really a good idea. But to educate them is more like it. So what I'm getting at is that when it comes to, kind of wokeism in atheism, which the gender is part of it, the gender and sex is part of it. And, I would be more than happy to continue talking on that. But it seems like we're getting away from the community as a whole seems to be treading towards that, the California BS, like I'm whatever the heck I say I am. And while there are definitely exceptions, and they should be acknowledged, and they should be able to, I do feel like it's going too far, particularly in the atheist community. Now, I understand that the atheist.
What do you mean? What do you mean by too far?
Yeah, let me, if I may. That feels like a pretty straw man argument to go with whatever they're doing in California, whatever that means. But if I'm understanding you, your concern is that the atheist community as a whole is going too far into wokeism. So you can let me know if that is an inaccurate summation, but it does require us to have some understanding of what wokeism is or what that means. A convenient definition for us to use is the one that was put forth by Ron DeSantis' legal team a couple of years ago, where they said that wokeism is the belief that there are systemic injustices in American society and the need to address them. Is that a definition that we can work with here?
Yeah, that's a wonderful definition. I love it.
Okay, so if that is the concern, that the atheist community is becoming too convinced that there are systemic injustices in American society and too invested in the need to address them, then I have to say I don't agree. I think that there's perhaps not a reasonable limit on how concerned we can be over that issue until we have resolved it.
And that's where I would disagree with you, because I would think that would be I'm not minimizing the importance of said topics or addressing said topics, but just like I feel like every topic needs its space. In other words, like, for instance, the atheist community should be speaking about, atheist community, that didn't make sense. That was redundant. But you get what I'm saying.
Austin, but we're not purely the atheist community. We are a secular humanist community, right? And so if we are a secular humanist community, we have to lean into the humanism. And that's what we would argue separates our position from some other positions who are more anti-trans, more anti-LGBTQ, more there's a lot of like ethnocentrism within certain atheist circles. And I don't think we should adhere to just being atheist, because that only means we have a shared disbelief or a shared lack of belief in a deity, right? But we are claiming the position of secular humanism, and as such, we should have a goal to reduce suffering. And so we are heading in the right direction. And so maybe you don't identify as a secular humanist, but if you do, then you should consider why you'd be hesitant to go in that direction.
No, I'm not hesitant to go in the direction. I could have that conversation all the time. It's more of like the time and place of it. So like my objection isn't to speaking about said topics and addressing those topics and addressing inequalities and addressing, anomalies maybe that's the wrong word, in, sex and how it changes and how it's abnormal and all the exceptions that exist in society and the human species. But it's more of the time and place. And because I have a lot of friends that are deeply, and I work in an industry that is deeply far right. They are very closed-minded, very right, very. I vote Republican sometimes, so I don't want to say Republicans, but it's far right. It's Republican. So and I've had these conversations with them. Like, for instance, I'm pretty honest and upfront about, what I believe. And every now and then, it very rarely happens because I don't advertise that I'm an atheist. But I've had a conversation with a coworker before, and he found out I was an atheist. And I found that when we have conversations with them and we not meet them in the middle, as in we compromise our beliefs and our values. I mean more as in what do I mean? Am I contradicting myself? I don't know.
Let me try and clarify or simplify a little bit if I can. In terms of standing, sure. Ben and I are not here or able to represent the atheist community or the atheist agenda. We're here nominally as representatives of the Atheist Community of Austin, which does hold some official position statements affirming the rights of trans folks. And I guess what I'm hearing from you, Austin, is that it feels like perhaps on this show specifically, perhaps within the confines of this organization, or maybe the broader culture and community in which this network exists, we're spending perhaps too much time focused on a statistically small, uncommon experience. And if that's the position, and please forgive me if I'm off point, I would disagree, because if only 2% of the houses are on fire, that's the 2% that we're going to focus on.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
And Austin,
that's not my point.
Maybe I don't know if you're struggling to frame it in this way, but there would be an argument that I would be okay making for, we shouldn't need to be arguing about these things because we should already be promoting their well-being. We should already be promoting an egalitarian society. Like that should be the expectation, and we shouldn't have to keep reminding people. But and this is where I would say, like there are lots of times where I would say I don't want to talk about trans issues. I would love to not have to, but the problem is a lot of times we do have to, because there is inequality that causes suffering, and that causes people to not have community, to not have access to certain things that they need to survive. And so on the one hand, yes, I would say that there's a time and a place to have those kinds of debates. But on some of these more public platforms, we still need to have those discussions, because there's the baseline assumption from a lot of people that we don't deserve those human rights. And so, yes, I would love to not do it. But unfortunately, the common assumption is not that we deserve rights. And that's why we need to keep talking about it, and why we need to bring up more of these woke topics.
Right. Okay.
So.
So I want to make sure I address what you just said. So yes, 100%. That is that's like 75% of what I wanted to argue, but there's also a 25% where I'm like, I do think it's gone too far, which is my original point. Not in rights, not that they deserve less rights or anything like that. Not that they don't deserve the same health care, that they, all that they're being, denied health care. I'm aware of all those instances and those issues. So 75% is exactly what you just said, where I just don't want to hear about it anymore because it's obvious. And I'm not obviously calling in to say, hey, stop talking about that, because who the hell am I? But it's more of like, it's 75% that, yes, but 25% on top of that, like, really though?
Let's try not to be incredulous about it. Like, we've been talking around this. We've been on this call for a good 10 minutes now. I'd like you to express in very plain English the problem that I have, the stance that I have, the thing that I want to see less of, or the thing that I need to stop. Like, what is the problem that you are aiming to solve?
Okay. The problem I'm aiming to solve is that I want to clarify the definition. And that's the original, that's point blank. So when
that's a dumb position to take, though. That's a dumb, if you're going to clarify the definition, if you're going back to the sex and gender thing, that's a dumb thing to be pedantic about. Like, would you prioritize being pedantic about a definition over other people's well-being? Is that an appropriate trait for you?
I don't see why they're. So if we want to help people, we need to. Those are important. So just like you're a doctor. So if I want to treat a disease, I need to be able to identify it.
But you don't, Austin. I'm getting very frustrated because you don't. You keep using the excuse of science to make really bad arguments, and it's pissing me off. So I don't want to be angry at you.
I haven't.
But we don't use one definition and assume that's the entirety of someone's complexity, right? Context matters in language, right? Think of the term mother. What's the one single definition of mother?
Child.
A person
with a child. Okay. Does that have, so if somebody does not birth their own child, but they choose to adopt one, are they still a mother?
Yeah, they're still a mother, but they're still a woman, right? So you wouldn't
medically, Austin, shut up. So if I say mother, and I use it generally to say mothers, mothers should breastfeed their children. If I make a generalized statement, in your brain to categorize which mother you're talking about, but they're both mothers, right?
Sure.
So the word does not have a super solid, use this all the time in every context definition. It changes based on context. And that's how language works in general. And so if you demand that sex and gender have so clearly defined definitions that are so narrow, but not any of the rest of language has to do that, you're making a special pleading argument for this one thing. Right? And we don't look at medicine that way. We don't take a population and then use that to define what the individual has to do to meet that definition. Right? Like, we can say that people with lupus don't all have the same presentation of lupus. We know that not all women have a uterus, but when we say that, like, women should get cervical cancer screenings, like, yeah, I would agree, you should be more specific in your language, but people know how to categorize that. You're not asking someone with a hysterectomy to get a pap smear. You're not asking for that. Like, you're not asking the 90-year-old to get a pregnancy test most of the time. Like, I can agree that there are contexts where you need to use different words to be more specific, but to say that a particular generalizable term is not specific enough is a problem with maybe you're not using clear enough words. It's not the fault with the word itself, and it's not the fault of people making a more generalizable statement that we know you can separate out into context.
I see. Well, I don't actually know. I mean, I could keep rambling, but I don't know how to respond.
Yeah. Yeah, I think go do some thinking about it, because I think you want a very pedantic definition of things, and the world doesn't offer that. The world is not as black and white as you want it to be, and you just have to deal with it. So thanks for calling in.
No aspect of the demographic checkbox is going to be super cut and clean in that way. You know, if we are talking about somebody's race, like, does one drop make you this or that? That's a very problematic stance, as we've seen historically in this country. There's really nothing that you would see whenever we're talking about somebody's identity in these broad categories that we would be comfortable pointing at, like, a genetic marker and be like, well, this is the thing that makes them that. Yeah. But for some reason, we're trying to insist on it here. It's not a very valid argument when we start to deconstruct it. But the thing that I would ask you to just consider, Austin, as we're walking away, is why would you ask for this special pleading in this special circumstance? What is it about this topic, this issue, this concern, this change in our cultural structure that is upsetting or galling in some way? And why is it taking up so much of our time culturally? Why did it take up, the first third of this show today? There's something important here, and there are some big feelings all around it. I would just ask you to consider your own. I do appreciate you bringing up the issue and giving us an opportunity to talk you through some of the concerns we have here.